Greetings, programs. Welcome to Trekonomics, Chapter 2. Why is everybody so worried about holograms taking over the universe? The meaning of work in Star Trek society. Nog, the nephew of Quark, the Ferengi bar owner of Deep Space Nine, has decided to join Starfleet. No Ferengi has ever been admitted to Starfleet Academy. He goes to Captain Cisco to request a letter of recommendation. At first, the captain is taken aback. He is highly suspicious of the young Ferengi's motives. His species is feared and loathed around the galaxy for its ruthless entrepreneurial drive and shady business practices. Heroism, enlightened ethics, and self-sacrifice are not the first things that come to mind when thinking of the Ferengi. Besides, Nog is the space station's resident juvenile delinquent. He is not an assiduous student at school, and has had several run-ins with the law. The captain would know, as Nog and his own son Jake are best friends. Nog does not help his case by presenting Cisco with a hefty bag of gold-pressed latinum as a token of his appreciation. The faux pas is a tragic cultural misunderstanding. When young Ferengi come of age, they are supposed to purchase an apprenticeship from a weathered elder who will teach them the ropes and initiate them in the ways of the great material continuum, while duly exploiting them as a matter of course. To all but a Ferengi, Nog's offering of his lifetime savings comes across as an undisguisable bribe. Despite the ill-advised attempt at a backsheesh, Cisco is intrigued by Nog's request. With the help of Jadzia Dax, his trusted science officer, he decides to test the kid's resolve. They instruct Nog to take inventory of Cargo Bay 12, where Starfleet stores a lot of very valuable supplies. Nog passes with flying colours. He completes his assignment in record time. To Cisco's relief, it appears that Nog has not stolen anything. On the contrary, he managed to locate items that escaped the scrutiny of Starfleet officers during previous inspections. Nog has not only demonstrated his work ethic to Cisco and Dax, but also his honesty. He is a hard worker, concludes Cisco. But what of his true reasons? Why Starfleet? After all, nothing could be further from the Federation's ideals than the Ferengi way of life, enshrined in almost 300 rules of acquisition. Cisco confronts Nog. He announces to him that he will not write the letter of recommendation because it looks like another one of Nog's schemes. Angry and crestfallen, Nog finally gives away the truth in an impassioned plea that in turn reveals considerably more about both his character and the circumstances he finds himself in. It is one of these perfect Star Trek moments when the writing and acting coalesce into a scene much greater in emotion and significance than the sum of its parts. "I don't want to end up like my father," he says. "My father is a mechanical genius. He could have been the chief engineer of a starship if he'd had the opportunity. But he went into business like a good Ferengi. The only thing is, he's not a good Ferengi, not when it comes to acquiring profit. So now all he has to live for is a slim chance that someday, somehow, he might be able to take over my uncle's bar. Well, I'm not going to make the same mistake. I want to do something with my life, something worthwhile." The cultural norms of Ferengi society impose terrible constraints. Ferengi males, and males only, are expected to go into business and to seek profits all their lives, whether or not they like it, or have the lobes for it, an innate talent for the acquisition of wealth. Those who don't, like Nog's father, Rom, are relegated to working in meaningless obscurity, enriching their bosses under the comically exploitative terms of Ferengi employment contracts. Besides the soul-crushing toll it extracts on individuals, such blind deference to Ferengi tradition amounts to gross economic malpractice. Nog is right about his father. The idiot brother, as Quark affectionately calls his sibling, truly is an engineering genius. He single-handedly invents the self-replicating, cloaked minefield that delays the Dominion invasion of the Alpha Quadrant. Ferengi society, because of its strictures and its obsession with profits, cannot recognize nor make use of any of Rom's genius. This complete waste of talent is also a waste of opportunity. One would expect better in the way of humanoid resource management, from a species that prides itself on its business acumen. The meaning of work. By contrast, the Federation offers the promise of finding one's true calling, free of the shackles of tradition and economic necessity. A mechanical genius, a mad scientist, a cook, a writer, even a young Ferengi ne'er-do-well, all will get a chance to find a role commensurate with their talents, if not their hopes. The Federation does not require anyone to twist themselves into knots to become what they are not in pursuit of material wealth. Work, in the Federation, is not a matter of compulsion or survival. Federation citizens need not perform tasks or exercise professions that do not suit their inclinations, just so they can afford to put food on the table and enjoy the respect of their peers. Technology alone does not make the Federation what it is. Free and plentiful energy, pervasive automation, artificial intelligence, and replicators certainly help. They are superb engineering solutions to a vast engineering problem, the supply of the basic necessities of life. The benefits they accrue depend entirely on value systems and social organization. Case in point, Quark makes extensive use of all these incredibly advanced technologies in the operation of his dining and gambling establishment. The Replicators must really cut down on his food preparation costs. He just happens to keep all the profits to himself. What makes the Federation so appealing to Nog is not the technology-driven cornucopia or the absence of money. In fact, he harbours a dim view of that particular aspect of the Federation's economic system. It is the nature and meaning of work. It is almost a paradox to state it this way, but in a society where nothing is scarce, and consequently where work is no longer a prerequisite for survival, finding good reasons to work becomes paramount. The defining existential question everybody has to ask themselves: why work at all if it's not necessary? Because learning, making, and sharing is what makes life in the Federation worth living. Work, no longer a necessary burden, is the glue that holds the Federation together. It is the social bond and social contract that imparts substance and significance to life. Work, its life-affirming power, is why aliens and artificial lifeforms are so eager to join the Federation. In Star Trek's 24th century, you don't work for money. Because you can't work for money. There is no money. And therefore no salary work and no profit motive. Starfleet officers do not get monthly pay or bonuses for re-upping. And neither does Ben, the jovial civilian waiter from 10 Forward Lounge, who hustles Starfleet officers at poker. Poker chips have no monetary value, by the way. Ben's employer, Guinan, the mysterious Elorian bartender, does not really run a Synthahol concession business on a starship, because her bar, 10 Forward, does not charge for drinks. Rice's Jamaharon attendants cannot be qualified as sex workers, since they do not require pay for their services, and even make it a point to dispense their favours freely to any off-world visitor. Dr. Zimmerman does not earn royalties for his invention of the emergency medical hologram, as there are seemingly no patents in the Federation. The Federation News Service does not pay per word to publish Jake Ciscos stories from the front lines of the Dominion War. In short, everybody in the Federation seems very busy and hard at work, yet no one gets paid. It sounds like a rotten deal. What could be so enticing to a young, wayward Ferengi? What gives? Work and gift-giving. The most striking aspect of work in the Federation is not so much that nobody gets paid for their toil, but rather that anybody would even toil at all. There is no material objective rationale for anybody to do anything. All the basic necessities of good life are free and available at a cost of zero. Replicators harness the quasi-unlimited power of the matter-antimatter reactor to convert energy into any type of finished goods, from Picard's tea Earl Grey hot, to cheesy wedding presents, to weapons. Furthermore, if you want to spend your entire life bumming around the beaches of Risa, you are most welcome to do so, and you probably should, if you ask me. Nothing and nobody will prevent you from wallowing in the most abject and satisfying sloth. Considering that there does not seem to be any disincentive to searching your life away, it is amazing that starships are built in such great numbers, that cities are bustling with activity, and that planets are being settled, and that scientific labs and facilities are pumping out research papers and inventions at a brisk pace. On all accounts, the Federation is a thriving society, made of a small cohort of extraordinarily creative individuals on the one hand, the proverbial 1%, and an overwhelming number of very industrious regular folks, human as well as non-human, on the other hand. The Federation's 99%, in the parlance of our times, is surprisingly bereft of free riders. There is nothing particularly odd in choosing to work for free. By free, I do not mean coercion or slavery, of course. Even today, we often get to practice our skills and share their fruits freely. We volunteer to clean up beaches or to chaperone kids at school. We help out friends and neighbours. We share our experiences and knowledge online. We already make a ton of things out of passion, that is, without expectation of a financial reward. This little book being a good example. We even have the opportunity to contribute to these labours of love to the greatest common pot that has ever been invented, the Internet. Some economists have attempted to determine the value provided by communally built and shared resources such as Wikipedia. If included in official statistics, they would add a couple of points to the US GDP. For example, Halvarian from Google estimates that search engine use adds $500 per user per year of consumer surplus in time saved. MIT professor Eric Bernolfson, for his part, pegs the value of free internet information at around $300 billion annually. Official GDP calculations and the so-called leading indicators were not geared to account for the value of freely exchanged goods and services. There's a large and growing part of the economy that escapes the accountants and statisticians' fastidious gaze. Yet, from the gifting rituals of the Pacific Northwest's First Peoples, the potlatch, to food banks and philanthropy, gifting goods, services, and time has always been an integral part of civilization. Altruistic collaboration counts as a uniquely human trait, a powerful adjuvant to social relations. It has given our species a critical evolutionary advantage. The advent of the Internet has enabled us to intensify and expand our deep-seated habit of sharing, giving, and collaborating. Ugly and buzzy Silicon Valley words such as crowdsourcing and sharing economy fail to obscure the undeniable fact that thanks to the Internet, I can have free, unlimited, and immediate access not only to Craigslist, but to the accumulated wisdom of almost all of humanity, present and past. One can debate at great lengths about the very nature and definition of progress, but sometimes progress is just like porn. You know it when you see it. In this case, it is glaringly obvious. In the Federation, work is not essential to maintain the physical well-being of people. The basic reason for working, survival, no longer applies. Work is still essential to Trekonomics, but for purposes of a higher order, increasing knowledge, perfecting technology, promoting individual and collective self-improvement. The objective necessary to transform raw materials into consumable goods has not magically disappeared, but for the most part, it has been offloaded to replicators. Citizen robots. Replicators seem to make robotic labor largely redundant in the daily operation of Trekonomics. Besides Data and his brother Law, one hardly ever sees robots in action, whether android or specialized. Ships are manned by multi-species crew. Asteroids are mined by workers. Restaurants and bars are staffed by flesh and blood waiters. Artificial intelligence seems to reside only in ships' computers, which can respond to queries and orders in natural language. That, however, is hardly a sign of self-awareness, just raw processing power and very good programming. When the occasional holodeck program becomes self-aware, such as the case of Sherlock Holmes' nemesis Professor James Moriarty, it is chalked up as a freak occurrence of emergent properties rather than a deliberate creation. One notable exception to the paucity of robotic workers is the assignment of the entire complement of the first version of the emergency medical hologram, all 675 of them, to waste transfer barges and dilithium mining. This is the only example in the canon of large-scale use of non-specialized, self-aware mechanical labor, if indeed a collection of photons generated by holometrics can be counted as mechanical. And then again, this happened because the EMH Mark I was deemed as defective, to the great humiliation of Dr. Zimmerman, its creator and model. There is some logic to not using robots or holographic beings in production. In Trekonomics, replicators handle the bulk of commodity manufacturing duties, while handmade products have outsized perceived value. There is almost no automation in agriculture, because that is the whole point. Everyday food is replicated, while real food, grown with great love and intense care for tradition, is a very special thing indeed. Upon being presented with the airline meal sounding entree number 103, curried chicken and rice with a side order of carrots, a dejected Commander Eddington remarks, It may look like chicken, but it still tastes like replicated protein molecules to me. General-purpose robotic labour is squeezed between the ubiquity and convenience of replicators and the output of countless artisan masters. Another possible explanation for the apparent lack of robotic labour in Star Trek canon is citizenship. It may be found in two of the more extraordinary episodes of the TV run, written and broadcast 10 years apart. The Measure of a Man from the Next Generation and Voyager's Author. Both of these episodes deal with the issue of the rights, under human law, of self-aware artificial intelligence. In other words, what constitutes sentience and personhood in the age of general, programmatic artificial intelligence? And, if sentient machines exist, how can they be put to work and treated as mere servants or slaves when they are seemingly endowed with free will and aspirations of their own? Both episodes expand on Isaac Asimov's pioneering work in Bicentennial Man, where Andrew Martin, the robot protagonist, gains the right to be declared human by having his positronic brain programmed to die after 200 years of existence. It is one of Asimov's most striking stories because of its singular depth of psychological development. Asimov was notorious for his cardboard approach to human characterization. The Measure of a Man is one of the high points of Next Generation's entire 7 seasons. It is essentially a legal drama. On layover at Starbase, Enterprise welcomes Commander Bruce Maddox on board, a noted Starfleet roboticist. Maddox has come all this way to order Data to report to his lab, so he can study the android's programming and positronic brain. His objective is to reverse engineer Dr. Soong's creation to provide Starfleet with a multitude of androids. Maddox's plan to disassemble Data may put his subject's life in jeopardy, except that, as Maddox argues, Data is neither a lifeform nor a subject, but is merely property of Starfleet. His superior officer, Maddox, can therefore order him to submit to the cybernetic equivalent of a dissection, without impinging on his fundamental rights or breaking any established law. Upon Data's adamant refusal, a hearing is convened. Due to staff shortages at the starbase, Will Riker is summoned by Captain Philippa Louveau, the base commander who presides over the proceedings, to prosecute Maddox's case against his Enterprise's brother-in-arms. Captain Picard will act as Data's advocate. Riker, rather convincingly, demonstrates that Data's artificial nature to the court. He makes him bend a steel rod, asks him to remove his mechanical arm, and then turns off the android by dramatically pushing a switch hidden beneath his ribcage. Pinocchio is broken. Its strings have been cut, Riker exclaims, devastated rather than triumphant. The prosecution rests. A dispirited Picard mulls his defense over with Guinan, the wise bartender, who marks with gravity, "Consider that in the history of many worlds there have always been disposable creatures. They do the dirty work. They do the work that no one else wants to do, because it's too difficult or too hazardous. And an army of Datas, all disposable? You don't have to think about their welfare. You don't have to think how they feel. Whole generations of disposable people." After proving to the court that Data meets Maddox's own criteria for sentience, Picard passionately argues that, according to the ideals of the Federation, a sentient being cannot be created as property. Patrick Stewart, the consummate thespian, hits all the right notes of a very challenging legal monologue. Sooner or later, this man, Maddox, or others like him, will succeed in replicating Commander Data. The decision you reach here today will determine how we regard this creation of our genius. We will reveal the kind of people that we are, that he is destined to be. We will reach far beyond this courtroom and this one android. We could significantly redefine the boundaries of personal liberty and freedom, expanding them for some, or savagely curtailing them for others. Are you prepared to condemn Commander Data and all who will come after him to servitude and slavery? Your Honor, Star Trek was founded to seek out new life. Well, here it sits, waiting. The court rules in favour of Data. Sentience is sentience, whether biological or cybernetic. Data cannot be treated as property. He is an autonomous, self-aware, sentient being. He is a subject in every sense. Therefore, he cannot be denied the same rights and protections enjoyed by every other Federation citizen. The ruling helps cement the notion that self-aware android robots cannot be used as the reserve army of capital, to quote Marx's famous broadside on industrialists' use of cheap labour. It also precludes any chance that the Federation would evolve into a version of Isaac Asimov's Space's World, where robot-to-human ratio can rise up to 10,000 to 1. When more datas are finally built, they will be citizens. They will freely choose their paths in life and will not serve anyone but society as a whole, like everyone else. It remains to be seen how their unlimited lifespan and superior cognitive abilities will affect the society-wide reputational sweepstakes. The institutions of the Federation already have many procedures in place to accommodate interspecies variations and division of labour. For example, the Vulcans' well-known affinity for logical reasoning may make them prominent scientists, but certainly not the dominant ones. All in all, there seems to be a place in the Federation for many more of Data's kind. Like Data, they will become great scientists, Starfleet officers, stage actors, engineers, and artisans. They will be encouraged to experience humanity's journey to its fullest, and their achievements and contributions will be warmly welcomed. Photons Be Free. The situation is somewhat more complex in the case of holographic beings. Voyager's Doctor represents a whole different set of challenges for Trekonomics. Unlike Data, whose parts and programming are very hard to copy even for Starfleet's foremost roboticists, the Doctor is exactly the same thing as a replicator pattern, infinitely reproducible because he is purely software. As I mentioned above, this particular feature allows for a relatively hassle-free deployment of the EMH for a wide range of missions, medical or otherwise. In addition, upgrading software is much less taxing than building positronic brains and limbs from scratch. Forking and adapting the basic software into new instances, and thus new holographic beings, is entirely manageable by one person. We discover that the irascible Dr. Zimmerman, the original, has populated his lab with holographic animals and even a young human female assistant. Not to mention that the holographic Doctor, throughout the course of Voyager's 7 seasons, has constantly added to his programming in his spare time. He even chose to leave untouched the original behavioural routines written by his creator. The Doctor has a horrible bedside manner to unending comical effect. While the Doctor exhibits all the usual traits of a person, including an overinflated and mildly delusional sense of self-worth, he is not considered an individual subject under Federation law, and neither are his brothers that he calls the other Photonics. The show starts as a farce. The Doctor has become a published author to his great satisfaction, and who would not be? His first novel, Photons Be Free, allows the reader or player to be the holographic Doctor's character in a dramatized version of Voyager's adventures in the Delta Quadrant. A reputable publisher, Bronte & Forrester, has agreed to distribute the Doctor's work throughout the Federation. As the title suggests, Photons Be Free is not a particularly subtle piece. The protagonist, in effect a human simulacrum of a real-life hologram, must endure terrible torments at the hands of brutish, violent, and bigoted fictional crew members, precisely because she is a hologram. While the caricatures of Voyager's ensemble are hilarious and often offer a parody of the whole show, the author's intent is very serious. The Doctor wants to raise awareness of the plight of photonic beings, and to turn his advocacy for his rights as an individual into a movement. It works almost too well. So much so that the Doctor reluctantly agrees to tone down his opus out of consideration for his fellow crewmates and friends. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to him, Bronte & Forrester has begun to distribute his garish original draft to great acclaim. The Doctor wants it recorded immediately, but the publisher refuses on the ironic grounds that the author, not being a person, does not have rights over his own creation. A hearing is convened to settle the matter. Voyager's senior staff give heartfelt testimonials to the Doctor's humanity. As proof of his agency and personhood, Captain Janeway recounts how the Doctor once disobeyed her orders so as not to break the Hippocratic Oath. And yet that all is not enough to sway the arbitrator. In the end, the Doctor is granted limited rights as an author, but not his full rights as a person. In the show's last scene, we see several copies of the Doctor mindlessly working underground in a dilithium processing facility. One of them recommends to a fellow worker that he check out his new holo novel called Photons Be free on his next diagnostic and maintenance break. And thus, on a forlorn mining asteroid, begins the hologram's liberation movement. Lewis Zimmerman's quip about people's fear that holograms may somehow take over the galaxy should be taken very seriously. His holographic doctor is indeed a person, and an extraordinary one at that. By his own efforts, he has grown far beyond his original programming. He has even become a popular holonovelist. It is only a matter of time before he and his brethren rise up from their position as exploited labourers and claim their full civil rights. Zimmerman does not regard this as a threat. He believes that holographic beings will not suddenly throw good people out of work. Their integration into the Federation's economy will be no different than normal demographic growth or inducting another star system as a member. Once integrated, the Photonics will show the same dedication and love for creative activities as organics. They will join the frantic competition for reputation, and their contributions to sciences and arts will add to the Federation's overall wealth. The Zen of flipping burgers. To better get a sense of the emotional aspect of work in Trekonomics, we should set aside holograms, androids, and replicators, and focus on low-tech, flesh-and-blood people for a minute. Let's look at a typical Federation small business that eschews automation and relies on human craft for its fame. Captain Cisco's father's famous restaurant in the New Orleans French Quarters, Ciscos Creole Kitchen. Every business owner can appreciate that controlling labour costs is critical to a company's survival. The good news is that in Trekonomics, labour costs are non-existent. There is a trade-off, however. Business owners will not generate any cash flow or profits because money does not exist either. Cisco's Creole Kitchen success is gauged in reputation and popularity. It is highly dependent on maintaining the highest standards of quality and service. It must keep its 5-star rating on the galactic version of Yelp at any cost. And unfortunately, there is no easy way, monetary or otherwise, to make bad reviews disappear. Like today, Cisco's Creole Kitchen's business hinges as much on the owner's managerial abilities as on the employee's involvement. One could argue that because employees are free from the necessity to take on a job, any job, they are self-selected for passion and natural inclination for the tasks at hand. They also participate in the company's reputational gains, or opprobrium, so that they are highly motivated to deliver outstanding products to customers. For Nathan, Cisco's Creole Kitchen executive chef, cooking is more than just a job. It is an opportunity to shine, to build credibility, to make a name for himself, however trivial or menial the assignment. In that sense, the organization of work in the Federation resembles older, pre-industrial forms of arrangements. Working as a chef at Cisco's restaurant must hold a deeper and more personal meaning to Nathan than merely flipping burgers in order to make the rent. It is more akin to an apprenticeship with a master of the trade. It requires great passion and dedication. The potential rewards for the apprentice are proportional to his or her commitment. Nathan seems to have spent his entire life honing his craft at Cisco's in the way of a great Japanese sushi master, but other people may choose more eclectic paths for their career explorations. Both options are readily accepted. The only real limits are one's imagination and job availability. Not all jobs and positions are available at all times. The kitchen at Cisco's can only accommodate so many interested job seekers. To a certain extent, intriguing jobs and careers, whatever their duration, belong in the same category as experiential, one-of-a-kind goods, such as Chateau Picard. They are rivalrous. Your getting the line cook job at Cisco's prevents somebody else from getting it. People who are not going to make it. In the Federation, work exists to make you happy. This is reminiscent of many 19th century utopian works, which all try to imagine worlds where labour, leisure, and art would merge into a single activity. As a literary idea, the dissolution of work into leisure and passion arose in reaction to the industrial rationalization of production. Star Trek draws directly from that tradition and updates it from a late 20th century postmodern audience. By creating excitement and a larger meaning to life, work in the Federation fulfills the deep human need for belonging and recognition. Work is another way to love and be loved and to express one's unique sensibility. Some never quite succeed at this. The constant striving for recognition and social currency has a darker side. One has to work without respite. It is easy to lose yourself in dead-end projects, and the ladder is crowded and seemingly has no end. Society demands that you try your very best, and, at the same time, evaluates your progress and judges your achievements. Performance anxiety is a common mental illness. Lieutenant Reginald Barclay's recurring holodeck addiction is a testament to the inherent challenges of adjusting to an economy of reputation, especially if you tend to be a bit shy and clumsy instead of a take-charge Starfleet command-level officer. Dr. Bashir's father represents an even more poignant instance of that type of maladaptation. Richard Bashir and his wife Amsha are summoned to Deep Space Nine by Dr. Louis Zinnemann, in order for the Doctor to conduct background interviews about their son Julian's psychological profile. He needs their insights to create a more lifelike holographic model of the Doctor. Richard, Amsha, and Julian are deeply worried about Dr. Zimmerman's curiosity. They share a dark secret that could tarnish the good Doctor's spotless record, and indeed derail his whole career at Starfleet Medical. Richard Bashir introduces himself to Captain Cisco and Lieutenant Dax in a boastful and slightly flippant fashion. "Oh, I've done many things. At the moment I'm involved in landscape architecture, designing parks and public spaces mostly. I love working on projects that will be enjoyed by thousands of people long after I'm gone." Later, in the privacy of their quarters, Julian confronts his father. "So, you're doing landscape architecture now?" Richard replies, "Some very important people have expressed interest in my park designs. I have several good prospects on the horizon." Julian retorts bitingly, "You always have good prospects, but they always seem to stay just over that horizon." In fact, Richard has held many jobs, including third-class steward on a spaceship, but could never quite hold on to any of them. His restlessness and feelings of inadequacy must have been compounded by the fact that his young son showed all the signs of a serious learning disability. Ron Moore, who wrote the episode, describes Richard's anguish as an illustration of all those who have a hard time coping with the demands of the Federation's reputational economy. The Federation is a very nice place to live, but that doesn't mean you can't be a loser and that you can't screw up. In the 24th century, everybody seems to have a job, everybody's taken care of, and everybody has food. But there are people who are just not going to make it. And Bashir's dad is like that. The kind of guy who's always posturing himself as a success, but has never succeeded at anything. Meritocracy does not mean that everybody is a winner. For those who can't swing it, the imperative to build a meaningful life through work becomes a source of unbearable anxiety. Some are tempted to find a quick fix, to cheat. In meritocracy such as Federation, cheating is the highest crime. Richard is painfully aware of his existential difficulties in a society that thrives on achievement and recognition. He does not want his son to endure the same problems, to aimlessly bounce from job to job in search of a way to contribute his meagre talents, to be acknowledged. This leads him and his wife to seek a medical solution to Julian's disability, so that he may have a chance to compete at the highest level. They break the cardinal law of the Federation, and take Julian to Adjigum Prime, a non-aligned world, to undergo genetic enhancement. As Julian reveals to his friend Chief O'Brien, the technical term is Accelerated Critical Neural Pathway Formation. In the end, everything but my name was altered in some way. Afterwards, Julian thrived. No one ever knew, because in the Federation there is no stigma attached to success. The Federation has two absolute prohibitions. The Prime Directive, which forbids interference with other cultures, is directed outwards, so to speak. Meanwhile, the other absolute prohibition, genetic enhancement, fulfills an internal purpose. It aims to maintain the balance of Federation society. It enforces the Federation's commitment to equality of opportunity. By having his son's abilities genetically augmented, Richard Bashir deliberately subverted the meritocratic ethos that enables Trekonomics to exist. Any person who seeks an unfair advantage, however heartfelt their motive, only creates incentives for others to seek the same unfair advantage. As Worf dryly observes about the likes of Dr. Bashir, if people like them are allowed to compete freely, then parents would soon feel pressure to have their children enhanced so that they could keep up. Soon it's an arms race among parents, everybody's doping, and the process by which reputation is acquired is forever tainted. Trekonomics no longer functions. As we have seen in Trekonomics, economic capital and reputational capital are very different things. While one may inherit his or her parents' names and some of their reputation, there are no privileges afforded by economic capital, because there is no economic capital to be had, and therefore none to inherit and pass on to the next generation. There is no lottery of birth. Anyone can become captain, provided hard work, dedication, and a few lucky breaks. You rise on your own merits. Everyone gets a fair shake. The system is not rigged. An economic system where work is entirely decoupled from biophysical necessity and survival has its pitfalls and its dark corners. Utopia only works as long as everybody plays by the same rules, and even then it might not be a perfect fit for all. There are several instances of Federation natives who choose to leave it for good. Some may elect to live on non-aligned worlds, while others end up working for the Orion Syndicate, the criminal organization that even Ferengi fear. Of all the misfits, the strangest and scariest are those who ply their trade in Section 31. The secret agency, whose existence is not acknowledged by Starfleet, is in charge of protecting the Federation by any means necessary. Ira Behr, Deep Space Nine's showrunner and inventor of Section 31, among other very twisted and fascinating additions to the Star Trek universe, describes its members as the ones doing the nasty stuff that no one wants to think about. Section 31 operatives seem to be able to set aside any ethical qualms in the pursuit of their mission. Luther Sloan, who appears in several episodes of Deep Space Nine, is a certified sociopath by the Federation standards. In lieu of seeking fulfillment in scientific endeavours or in the mindful practice of an art, he finds meaning in deceit, manipulation, and covert violence. He rationalizes the amorality of his actions by invoking the superior interests of the Federation. Sloan and his colleagues are relics of a distant past, our less than idyllic present, where the ends seem to almost always justify the means. Section 31's existence calls into question the utopian romance of Star Trek by introducing an alternative and deeply disquieting explanation of the Federation's socio-economic stability and endurance as a polity. As if, at every turn, paradise had been buttressed by a cabal of trained spies and professional assassins. Humanoid capital. All of these characters, from Data and Dr. Bashir to holographic beings in Section 31, are extreme cases. They exist at the edges of what is considered normal in the Federation. They help us grok what lies within the limits they outline, mostly comfortable and happy places, such as the Picard family Bordeaux estate, the pleasure planet of Risa, or Cisco's Creole kitchen. Which begs the question, how does normal productive activity in the Federation, organised as it is around the fulfillment of human pursuits, allow for overall progress and economic growth? The rate of technological progress and productivity growth is likely much higher in Trekonomics than in any other type of society, even without a profit motive. The proportion of people who devote their time and talents to scientific research is considerably higher than under classic economic conditions. Between those who make it into the 1% and those who are actively trying, the Federation can cultivate and mobilize a staggering amount of humanoid capital. This is a direct result of low-skill labor replacement. Guaranteed abundance and reputational incentives create very significant efficiencies at humanoid capital allocation. Creative minds and scientific aptitudes are no longer wasted due to accidents of birthplace and the bad luck of challenging circumstances, or the necessity to survive. In that sense, the absence of poverty has a very high multiplier effect on both productivity and innovation. Further, the absence of a profit motive in the invention process itself radically broadens the scope and outcomes of a research program. While profit-driven product development has undoubtedly made enormous contributions to our world, it has had the unintended consequence of summarily leaving fallow entire avenues of potentially fruitful research. Consider genetically modified crops. Most of those in use are designed to resist just one particular brand of pesticide. Who knows what GMO could do if the same amount of intellectual firepower were trained on a less narrow, less exclusively profitable-driven aim. The same goes for so-called orphan diseases or new classes of antibiotics. Pharmaceutical companies tend to orientate their efforts towards fairly trivial and fairly effective psychoactive and erectile dysfunction drugs, because that is where the profits are. No one can fault agrochemical or pharmaceutical companies for acting as competitive businesses rather than humanitarian organizations. Within the confines of a suboptimal set of incentives, their behavior is perfectly rational. The benefits of reputation-driven open-source innovation cannot be overstated. There are many instances of this in the past century. The Green Revolution, spurred by the work of agronomist Norman Borlaug in Mexico and South Asia, the Homebrew Computer Club at Stanford University, and cosmopolitan particle physics community around Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein are but the most famous. In that respect, very little should be expected from profit-orientated attempts at duplicating these models of communal creativity. The quality of the people involved in such endeavours is not in question. However, the imperative to develop and accumulate patents for the mere purpose of private gains tends to constrain genius in unexpected ways, and to funnel outside rewards to those much less deserving intellectual property litigation specialists. Humanity celebrates geniuses. It seldom remembers lawyers. Trekonomics' premium on ingenuity and reputation acts upon people as an overwhelming incentive. This inevitably results in an anarchical profusion of inventions and provides fertile ground for social disruption. In a society where humanoid work has massively migrated towards research, invention, and art, where the rate of technological progress is extremely high, the spectre of creative destruction is an ever-present concern. One would have to assume that a lot of Federation policies revolve around channeling and marshalling that overflow of creative chaos. Yet, like riding a tiger, the march of technology is difficult to stop. In Trekonomics, tens of billions of tinkerers and amateur scientists are constantly hacking away at intractable conundrums, either in their garages or in more formal settings. Because demand does not condition research paths or adoption, the range and depth of products is not nearly as restricted as in our world. When Starfleet or the Vulcan Science Academy needs a nagging engineering problem solved, they can readily tap legions of inquiring minds all over the Federation, as well as an enormous library of pre-existing open-source technologies. Volume, unrestricted access, and wild creativity are decisive advantages over all the other civilizations of the galaxy, Borg and Dominion included. In the final analysis, people are the true wealth of the Federation and the source of its tremendous power. In Star Trek, automation provides the material basis for free work. It makes it possible. But wondrous machines are not sufficient. Shared values, the power of community norms, is what brings Trekonomics alive. If making money and owning a big car and a big house are the universally agreed upon ways to achieve status in your community, it is very likely that you will try your best to rise in these expectations. First and foremost, humans are social animals. The rewards for not conforming to society's standards are at best uncertain. You always run the risk of being cast out of the group, thus drastically reducing your chances to reproduce and pass on your genes. Similarly, if a society's prevailing norm is to accumulate reputation through the free exercise and sharing of one's talents, chances are most people will adhere to this convention. Here ends Chapter 2. Now for my thoughts. I don't have a whole lot to say about this chapter that's particularly exciting, new, or insightful. What I do have to say, I think I mentioned in the previous chapter's notes, it's true. People do want to work. If you look at any volunteer organisation, if you look at any group of retirees, you will find people who just want to be appreciated, who want to spend their time achieving something useful or good, or helping others. You won't find much in the way of volunteer work opportunities that are making money for big businesses, but you will find quite a lot of volunteer work opportunities working with the elderly, working with those who are less capable, working with kids, working with new refugees, that kind of thing. Any place where a person can help another person, you will find people volunteering their time for free. And who are these people? Well, if you go and look, you will find that the large majority of them all have silver hair. Why? Because in most societies, there is some concept of retirement. When you hit a certain age, 60 to 65 to 70, depending on where you live, there's an expectation that, hey, you've put in your work and now you will retire, and the state or something will look after you to an extent, thus allowing you to enjoy your golden years in retirement. Now that's nice, that's all well and good, but you're dealing with humans. And while retirement is certainly a change, the person that has retired is still a human being. They are still going to want to do something useful, except now they are freed from the day-to-day grind of just trying to make enough money to, survive or keep a roof over their head or whatever. They're retired. That part's done. Now, at least in a culture that actually has retirement plans and so forth, now they are free to enjoy their time how they like. They will certainly have a better work-life balance than they previously did, but you will find that they will quickly find some project to do, building boats, gardening, volunteering, that kind of thing, and of course, helping out with the grandkids, a classic activity. Well, same here. And like Manu said, if you have the choice to do whatever you like, if you don't have to work at a particular job just to keep a roof over your head, you're free to try anything. And a good proportion of the people who want to do life-changing research or amazing art or whatever is probably a good bit higher than it seems to be in our world, because those people who want to be amazing artists or amazing researchers, there just aren't enough places for them to do it, and not enough money for them to do the research or the art projects or what have you. In a materially abundant future, this is not an issue. And this is something that we've seen in the modern world. If you recall, in FDR's New Deal back in the day in the US, hiring all those people and then finding something useful for them to do led to an explosion of not only research, but public works, parks, wildlife parks, art installations, and just amazing infrastructure that just made life so much more pleasant and wonderful in society. And the same sort of thing happened in Soviet Russia, where with everybody having a job and with everybody not needing to desperately scramble to keep a roof over their head, so to speak, they were able to take any excess people, any surplus labour, and put them to use, improving life for everybody else. So it's not just an American thing. This is something that happened around the world. But yeah, Manu puts a bit more thought into it here. What are the other effects of competition and the reputational economy? Kind of interesting. But, and, as he mentions, there's a bit of a dark side there. But consider that dark side. That dark side is essentially feeling a bit bummed out because you weren't that successful or whatever. Richard Bashir, Dr. Bashir's dad, may not have been successful. He may have had a bit of a reputation as a bit of a loser. But he didn't have to stress about was he going to eat next week. He didn't have to stress about was he going to be thrown out of his house. So his dark side was just feeling a bit bummed and not as successful as he would like. Compare that to the dark side in the 21st century. That's quite a bit different in scale and intensity. I would be willing to accept that dark side of a society any day over starvation and homelessness in a so-called modern country. Anyway, that's all for this episode. Tune in next time for Chapter 3. Bye for now.